The first light of dawn cracked the horizon like a fragile eggshell, painting the forgotten service road in hues of bruised purple and gold. Dust devils whispered across the cracked asphalt, remnants of a highway long abandoned to the weeds and the ghosts of truckers who once roared through. The air hung heavy with the scent of sagebrush and cooling earth, broken only by the low thunder of engines. 50 Harley-Davidsons cutting through the silence like a vow etched in chrome. At the head of the convoy rode Tom "Hawk" Daniels, his weathered face shadowed under a bandana, eyes sharp behind aviator shades that hid the scars of too many battles. The Iron Promise MC had been riding out this stretch for hours, a ritual pilgrimage to shake off the weight of the city. Hawk's leather vest, patched with the club's emblem, a clenched fist around a broken chain, creaked with each twist of the throttle. His brothers flanked him in formation, a wall of rumbling steel and unspoken loyalty, their beards dusted with the night's dew. Then up ahead, a shape materialized from the mist. A lone dog, stocky and scarred, planted rigid in the middle of the road like a sentinel carved from the desert itself. It wasn't barking, wasn't growling, it just stood there, ears perked, eyes locked on something at its paws. The convoy slowed, engines growling down to a murmur as Hawk raised a gloved fist. Brakes hissed, and the line of bikes came to a halt in a cloud of gravel and exhaust. "What the hell's this?" muttered Jax, the enforcer pulling up beside Hawk, his massive frame dwarfing the saddle. The dog didn't flinch as the pack dismounted, boots crunching on the parched ground. It was a mutt, ribs showing through matted fur, but there was a fierceness in its stance, a refusal to yield. Hawk approached first, slow and deliberate, his boots kicking up puffs of dust that caught the rising sun. The dog watched him, unblinking, as if measuring the soul behind the ink and leather. At its feet lay a small wooden box, no bigger than a bread loaf, locked with a rusted padlock and scarred from rough handling. Faded writing on the side read, "For the Promise," in letters that looked hand-carved, deliberate. "Easy, boy," Hawk murmured, crouching low. The dog tensed, but held its ground, a low rumble building in its throat, not aggression, but warning. Something about the scene twisted in Hawk's gut, an echo of old wounds. He glanced back at his crew, their faces a mosaic of curiosity and caution under the helmets. "Stay back. Let me see." The air thickened with the scent of heated metal from the idling bikes, mingling with the faint, metallic tang of fear, though no one would admit it. Hawk extended a hand, palm up, and the dog sniffed, then stepped aside just enough to reveal the box fully. With a nod from Hawk, one of the prospects fetched a crowbar from a saddlebag, the tool glinting like a promise of revelation. The lock gave way with a snap that echoed across the empty road, and Hawk lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in folds of a worn denim jacket, was a bundle no larger than a football, soft, rising and falling with tiny breaths. An infant, swaddled tight, face flushed and peaceful in sleep, no more than a few weeks old. The jacket bore a patch, threadbare but unmistakable. The Iron Promise emblem, the same one Hawk wore, faded from years of wear. A murmur rippled through the riders. "Jesus!" Jax breathed, his voice cracking like dry leather. Hawk's hand froze mid-air, the world narrowing to that tiny form. He recognized the jacket. Hell, he remembered the man who'd owned it. Riley Quinn, his brother-in-arms from the sands of some forgotten war, lost 3 years back in a wreck that the cops called accident, but the club knew was sabotage. Riley had worn that jacket like armor, patching it with the club's colors after their last ride together. "Keep the promise, Hawk," he'd said that night by the fire, voice thick with smoke and secrets. "If anything happens to me, watch over mine." The note tucked beside the child was simple, scrawled in Riley's jagged hand. "She's all that's left. Name her Noah for the flood we survived. The world's gone dark. Don't let it take her too. Iron Promise. Keep it. Noah. The name hit like a punch, stirring memories of Riley's stories, dreams of a family he'd built in the shadows, away from the club's rough edges. But Riley had died alone, believing he'd failed them, his last words a curse on the wind. Hawk's throat tightened, the desert air suddenly too thin. Around him, the hard men of Iron Promise, tattooed ex-cons, veterans with ghosts in their eyes, formed a silent circle, engines off now, the only sound the dog's soft whine and the child's faint stir. Tears welled unbidden in eyes that hadn't softened in decades. Jax knelt first, his massive shoulders shaking as he touched the bundle gently. Brother, he trusted us. One by one they bowed heads, the weight of legacy settling like dust on their leathers. 50 souls, forged in fire and chrome, wept not for loss, but for the fragile hope Riley had entrusted. Hawk lifted Noah carefully, cradling her against his chest, the warmth seeping through his vest like a balm on old scars. "She's ours now," he said, voice steady as the road ahead. "We ride for her. No one touches Iron Promise's blood." The convoy reformed, but slower now, protective. They veered toward the nearest trusted outpost, a quiet clinic run by an old ally, Nurse Elena, who owed the club a debt from darker days. As they rolled out, the dog trotted alongside, unbidden, a new shadow in their pack. Hawk glanced down at the child in the sidecar, rigged hasty from a saddlebag, her tiny fist clutching the edge of his sleeve. But the road wasn't empty of eyes. In the rear view, a black SUV lingered at the horizon, watching. Riley's enemies hadn't forgotten, and now with Noah in their care, the promise demanded more than tears. It demanded justice, the kind that burned slow and true. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the riders as the first threads of a deeper vow wove through the dust. This child would never stand alone. The Iron Promise would see to that, or die trying. Word count, 872. The engine's rumble softened to a distant hum as the convoy crested the low rise, the clinic's weathered sign emerging like a beacon from the scrubland haze. Nurse Elena's outpost wasn't much, a squat adobe building with peeling whitewash and a gravel lot scarred by years of emergency comings and goings, but it was a sanctuary, off the grid and off the books. The air here carried the sharp bite of antiseptic mixed with wild juniper, a far cry from the road's dusty bite. Hawk led the pack into the lot, his bike easing to a stop first. Noah's makeshift cradle secured against the vibrations that had lulled her into a deeper sleep. Elena stepped out from the shadowed doorway, her grey-streaked hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, arms crossed over her nurse's scrubs faded from too many washes. She'd patched up more than one Iron Promise rider in her day, from bar fights to the shrapnel souvenirs of old wars. And her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fittingly, took in the scene without a flicker of surprise. The dog, still shadowing Hawk's boot, sat alert at the bike's side, its gaze fixed on the bundle as if it alone understood the gravity. "Hawk," she said, voice steady but laced with the warmth of old alliances. "You bring trouble again, or just the usual?" Her gaze dropped to Noah, and the lines around her mouth deepened. No questions yet. Elena knew the club didn't roll up with fanfare for small matters. "Both," Hawk replied, dismounting with care, lifting the child as if she were forged glass. The riders formed a loose perimeter, engines cutting off one by one, until silence blanketed the lot like a held breath. Jax hovered close, his enforcer's bulk a shield, while the others scanned the horizon, hands near holsters hidden under vests. The black SUV from the road was gone, for now, but the prickle at Hawk's neck said it wasn't far. Eleanor took Noah gently, her calloused hands expert as she checked the infant's color, pulse, the faint rise of her chest. Weeks old, if that. Dehydrated, but strong. Who left her like this? She carried Noah inside, the door's screen slapping shut behind them, leaving the men in the dust-choked lot. Hawk followed, the dog slipping through at his heels. The interior was cool, lit by fluorescent strips that buzzed faintly overhead, shelves lined with supplies that spoke of quiet miracles. Bandages, IV bags, the tools of mending what the world broke. Riley's note lay open on the exam table now, the paper edges curling like whispers of regret. Elena read it silently, her expression hardening into something fiercer than pity. "Riley Quinn," she murmured, laying Noah on a soft blanket, starting a gentle rehydration. "He came here once, you know. Late night, bleeding from a gut wound he wouldn't explain. Said he had a girl waiting, someone the shadows couldn't touch. But life caught up." She glanced at Hawk, eyes probing the scars on his knuckles. "You were his promise keeper. He talked about you like you hung the moon." Hawk leaned against the wall, the wood cool against his back, memories flooding in like exhaust fumes. Nights around campfires where Riley spun tales of a life beyond the throttle, a woman named Sarah who'd seen past the ink to the man beneath. They'd met in a roadside diner, her laugh cutting through the club's roar like sunlight. But the enemies Riley had crossed, shady operators in the trucking rackets, the kind who bent laws like pretzels, had closed in. Sarah vanished months before Riley's crash, whispers of foul play that the club could never prove. Riley's last ride had been a desperate search, ending in twisted metal and a grave that felt too final. "We thought she was gone too," Hawk said, voice low, the words scraping out like gravel. "He died believing it, failed her, failed the kid." The dog whined softly, pressing against his leg as if echoing the ache. Outside, the riders gathered in a huddle, voices a murmur under the relentless sun. Jax paced, his boots carving furrows in the dirt. "We can't just hand her off, club's blood now, but those suits back there, they're circling." Murmurs of agreement rippled through, veterans like Old Man Reyes, who'd lost a son to similar shadows, nodding with fists clenched. They weren't outlaws for chaos. Iron Promise stood for the oaths that held when everything else crumbled. This was family, chosen in the fire of shared roads. Elena emerged after an hour, Noah swaddled fresh, a bottle in her arms. The child stirred, tiny mouth rooting, eyes blinking open to reveal a gaze as clear as desert sky. "She's stable, needs watching formula, a real crib, but she's a fighter, takes after her old man." She handed Noah back to Hawk, who cradled her awkwardly at first, then with a sureness that surprised even him. The warmth against his chest stirred something dormant, a crack in the armor of a man who'd buried too many brothers. The crew watched, a circle of leather and resolve, as Hawk rocked her gently. "We take her in," he said, the words sealing it. "Prospects rotate watches. Reyes, you're on supply runs. Diapers, whatever she needs. Jax, scout that SUV. Quiet, no guns blazing." Nods all around, the plan unfolding like a well-oiled chain. They weren't heroes from books. They were the ones who showed up when the sirens faded. But as the sun dipped toward noon, casting elongated shadows across the lot, a low engine growl echoed from the distance, not the convoy's thunder, but something sleeker, predatory. The dog bristled, hackles rising, and Hawk's hand tightened on Noah. Elena's face paled. "They're not done with Riley's ghosts," she said, "or his legacy." The riders mounted up, a protective phalanx forming around the clinic. Hawk secured Noah in a borrowed bassinet lashed to his bike, the dog leaping into the sidecar uninvited, as if claiming its place. They rolled out slow, eyes on mirrors, the road ahead twisting into uncertainty. The promise wasn't just words now, it was motion, a vow carried on the wind, binding 50 hard men to a fragile life. Tears had come easy at dawn, but resolve hardened like cooling steel. Whatever shadows pursued them, Iron Promise would stand firm, for Riley, for Noah, for the honor that outlasted the miles. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The growl of the pursuing engines swelled like a storm front, slicing through the afternoon haze that clung to the winding backroads. Hawk's convoy snaked along the cracked ribbon of asphalt, the clinic shrinking in the rear views as they pushed deeper into the scrublands, where mesquite trees clawed at the sky and the earth baked under a relentless sun. Noah's bassinet rocked gently in the sidecar, her tiny form bundled against the wind's bite. The dog curled protectively beside her, ears twitching at every shift in the air. The pack rode tight, a rolling fortress of chrome and vigilance, throttles humming low to mask the tension coiling in their spines. Hawk's shades caught the glare off the horizon, but his focus drilled into the side mirror. A sleek black SUV, low-slung and anonymous, hugging the curves a quarter-mile back. It wasn't local, no dust trail from farm roads, no plates that blended with the territory. Riley's ghosts, Elena had said, and now they breathed hot on the club's neck. Jax rode shotgun on Hawk's flank, his bulk leaning into the wind, signaling with a gloved hand to tighten formation. The prospects fanned out rearward, eyes peeled for ambushes in the gullies that flanked the route. "They're testing us!" Jax growled over the engine's roar, pulling even with Hawk for a moment. His voice cut through the rush of air, laced with the gravel of old grudges. Not charging in, just watching, like they know we got something they want. Hawk nodded once, jaw set like welded iron. The note's words burned in his mind. Riley's plea, a lifeline tossed into the void. He'd failed his brother once, burying him without answers, letting the sabotage slide under official whispers of mechanical failure. But Noah changed the math. She was proof Riley hadn't vanished into nothing. The club had scoured leads after the crash, empty motels, ghosted contacts, but Sarah's trail had gone cold, swallowed by the same shadows that now tailed them. If they wanted the child, it meant Riley's enemies saw value in her survival. A loose end to tie off. The road dipped into a shallow canyon, walls of red rock rising like silent judges, their surfaces etched with wind-whipped patterns that mirrored the scars on Hawk's arms. He eased off the throttle, the convoy slowing as the SUV closed the gap, its tinted windows gleaming like obsidian. A bead of sweat traced Hawk's temple, not from heat, but the weight of decision. Violence tempted, a reflex honed in foxholes and back-alley stands. But iron promise wasn't about blood for blood's sake. It was oaths kept clean, justice carved from truth. "Pull over!" Hawk barked into his helmet mic, the order rippling through the chain. Bikes veered to the shoulder in unison, a thunderous halt that kicked up ochre dust devils swirling like vengeful spirits. The SUV braked hard 50 yards back, doors opening with deliberate slowness. 3 figures emerged, suits crisp against the grit, faces shadowed under the brim of fedoras that screamed city import. No badges flashed. These weren't law, but the kind who bent it. The lead man stepped forward, hands visible, a tablet clutched like a shield. Mid-40s, slick hair, eyes cold as spent casings. "Mr. Daniels," he called, voice carrying smooth over the canyon's echo. "We need to talk about the package you picked up this morning." Hawk dismounted, boots planting firm in the dirt, the dog leaping down to flank him with a low snarl. The crew stayed mounted, a wall of leathers and stairs, hands resting easy but ready. Noah stirred in her cradle, a soft coo cutting the standoff like a thread of innocence. "Ain't no package," Hawk replied, tone even as a drawn blade. "That's family. You got business with Iron Promise. State it plain." The man halted at arm's length, glancing at the bassinet with a flicker that wasn't warmth. Calculation, maybe regret masked as duty. The child's mother was under protection, relocation program. Things went south, she couldn't make contact. "We're here to take her to safety, official channels." Jack snorted from his saddle, the sound rough as torn denim. "Protection? That's what you call vanishing folks? Riley Quinn asked us to watch his. Note's clear. You want her, you go through us." The suits exchanged glances, the leader's tablet glowing with what looked like redacted files, blurred names, timelines that danced around dates Hawk recognized from Riley's last frantic calls. Sarah's face flickered on the screen, younger, smiling in a photo that twisted Hawk's gut. "This isn't personal," the man pressed, stepping closer, the canyon wind whipping his tie like a noose. "The father's gone. Threats linger. We're the only ones who can shield her." Hawk's eyes narrowed, the air thickening with the scent of sun-baked stone and unspoken lies. He remembered Riley's voice by that final campfire, stars pricking the black like bullet holes. "If they come for us, Hawk, don't let them rewrite the story. Promise me you'll stand for what's real." The suits reeked of rewrite, corruption wrapped in procedure. The same machine that had labeled Riley's death an accident while pocketing payoffs from the trucking syndicates. "You're the threats," Hawk said quietly, the words landing heavy. Sarah reached out to Riley. "Not you. He trusted the club because your protection buried her." The dog growled deeper, hackles up, mirroring the shift in the air. One suit's hand twitched toward his jacket, but the leader waved him down, tension coiling like a spring. "We have authority," the man insisted, holding up the tablet like gospel, but his voice cracked just enough, a man's conscience peeking through the facade. Perhaps he'd buried doubts before, signed off on relocations that left families fractured. Hawk saw it, the flicker of a soul not fully lost. "Authority don't mean right," Reyes called from the rear, his veteran's rasp carrying the weight of lost patrols. "We seen your kind in the sand, promises broken for ink on paper. This girl's got blood that runs deeper." The canyon held its breath, dust settling slow as the standoff stretched. Noah fussed again, her cry a clarion that pierced the men's armored stairs. The leader's gaze dropped to her, softening for a beat, then hardening. "Hand her over or we escalate. Warrants, custody battles. You think a bike club stands against the system?" Hawk stepped forward, closing the gap, his presence a wall of quiet thunder. "We already stand. For Riley, for her. You want war, you got it, but on our terms. Truth first." He pulled Riley's note from his vest, holding it out like an indictment. The man took it, scanning the scrawl, color draining from his face as recognition dawned. Sarah's last words, relayed through Riley, a plea against the very program meant to save her. The suits retreated then, murmuring into earpieces, the SUV's engine firing up with a reluctant purr. They peeled away, vanishing around the canyon bend, but the echo lingered, a promise of return. Shadows lengthening with the sinking sun. Hawk watched them go, chest tight with the moral ache of half-victories. They'd bought time, but the system's jaws snapped closer. Remounting, the convoy reformed, engines roaring back to life in a symphony of defiance. Jax clapped Hawk's shoulder, a rare grin cracking his beard. "You stared 'em down, brother, like Riley would have." Hawk glanced at Noah, now quiet, her tiny hand waving at the wind. The dog settled beside her, guardian in fur and fang. As they rolled out, the road unfurling toward hidden safehouses, Hawk felt the club's bond tighten. 50 men woven by loss and light, carrying a legacy that no suit could sever. Justice wasn't a gavel's bang. It was this ride, this vow, etching honor into the miles. But the prickle remained. The suits would circle back, and when they did, the promise demanded more than words. It demanded sacrifice, the kind that forged legends from dust. The sun dipped low, bleeding orange across the jagged ridges as the convoy carved deeper into the backcountry, leaving the canyon's echoes far behind. Hawk's throttle twisted steady, the Harley vibrating under him like a heartbeat shared among the pack. Noah dozed in the sidecar, her breath soft against the rush of wind, the dog a vigilant shadow at her side, nose twitching at scents carried on the breeze. The air cooled with the fading light, carrying hints of pine from the encroaching hills, territory the iron promise knew like veins on a hand. Hidden trails mapped in memories of old runs. Jax rode point now, scouting ahead for the turnoff to Reyes's spread, a weathered ranch tucked in a valley fold, off any grid that mattered. It wasn't luxury. Sagging fences, a barn that leaned against the wind, a main house with shutters like half-closed eyes. But it was secure, ringed by dry washes that funneled intruders into kill zones. And Reyes had turned it into a haven for the club's strays over the years. His own loss, a son taken by the same institutional grind that chewed up Riley, made him the anchor for moments like this, where promises turned to plans. The gate creaked open under Jax's boot as they rolled in, the pack fanning out across the yard in a disciplined sweep. Dust settled slow, the engine's growl fading to ticks and pops as they killed the ignitions. Reyes dismounted from his ancient softail, his silver beard catching the twilight glow, eyes scanning the horizon like a man who'd waited too long for reckonings. "Brought the little one home," he said, voice rough but steady, clapping Hawk on the back. No questions. The radio chatter en route had painted the picture plain. Inside, the house smelled of aged wood and strong coffee, a pot always on for late-night councils. The riders gathered in the main room, a space cluttered with faded photos. Club rides, war buddies, a boy's smile frozen in time, lamplight casting warm pools on the scarred oak table. Hawk laid Noah in a makeshift crib, rigged from a drawer, lined with clean towels, the dog curling at its base like a furred sentinel. She stirred, eyes fluttering open to the murmur of voices, her gaze finding Hawk's as if recognizing the promise in his weathered lines. Elena had called ahead from the clinic, her voice crackling over the line with instructions. Formula warmed to body heat, burps after feeds, watches for fever in the desert chill. The prospects drew lots for first shifts, their young faces set with a seriousness that belied their inked arms and restless energy. "She's got Riley's fire," one muttered, mixing a bottle with hands that trembled just a touch, reminders that even hard men softened under fragile trusts. Hawk paced the porch as the group settled, the night air crisp now, stars pricking the velvet sky like distant oaths. The suits retreat, gnawed at him, their tablets glow a spectre of half-truths. Protection program, they'd claimed. Relocation for witnesses like Sarah, tangled in the trucking web's corruption. Riley had whispered of it once, how she'd fled after overhearing deals that poisoned routes and lives, the syndicates buying silence with threats. But the feds, complicit or worse, puppeteered by the same hands. Hawk's fist clenched on the rail, wood splintering under his grip. He'd stood down today, buying time with words, but the moral coil tightened, how far to bend before breaking. Jax joined him, leaning on the post with a beer in hand, the bottle's condensation beading like unshed tears. "They're law, but not justice," he said, voice low against the cricket chorus. Saw it in the leader's eyes, guys drowning in his own ink, probably signed off on Sarah's disappearance to keep the machine oiled. Jax had pulled records once, quiet inquiries into Riley's crash, falsified logs, a mechanic paid to look away. The club had let it lie, oaths to the road over vendettas, but Noah cracked that seal. "Justice ain't a badge," Hawk replied, staring into the dark where the valley swallowed the road. "It's showing up. Riley gave us this, his last stand. We fail her, we fail him all over." The words hung heavy, stirring the embers of old wars, where promises kept men alive longer than bullets. Inside, Reyes rocked Noah now, his massive frame gentle as he hummed a tune from forgotten patrols. The child's coos weaving through the low talk of rotations and scouts, but the night deepened with whispers of unrest. A prospect burst from the barn, face pale under his helmet. "Perimeter light, movement in the east wash, not animal." The pack mobilized silent, boots soft on the dirt, rifles slung low, not for show, but the quiet resolve of guardians. Hawk grabbed his sidearm, The weight familiar, and led the sweep, the dog at his heels with a muffled growl. Flashlights cut the gloom, revealing boot prints fresh in the sand, tire treads veering toward the main trail, the suits, or their shadows, circling, probing weaknesses. They found no one, but the intrusion lit a fire. Back at the house, the council convened under the lamp's halo, maps unrolled like battle plans. Guardianship papers, Reyes suggested, tracing routes with a calloused finger. Elena's got a lawyer contact, off books but solid. Name the club as kin, blood or not. Nods rippled. Iron Promise wasn't paper oaths, but this child demanded roots, a legacy against the void. Hawk sat at the table's head. Noah passed to him, her tiny fingers wrapping his thumb like a pact. The warmth seeped deep, cracking the ice of losses piled high. His own sister gone to the streets, brothers to the grave. Redemption wasn't grand gestures. It was this circle, 50 souls choosing family over flight. "We file it," he said, voice forging the vow, "and we dig. Sarah's out there, or was. Find her trail, end this clean." Jax leaned in, eyes fierce. "For the promise." The room echoed it, a chorus low and binding as the dog whined approval. Outside, the wind sighed through the pines, carrying the faint rumble of distant engines. Echo or threat, it didn't matter. The night watch set, the ranch a bastion of light in the dark. Hawk held Noah close, her breaths sinking with his, the moral weight settling like a mantle. Shadows loomed, corruption's tendrils reaching, but Iron Promise stood etched in starlight, loyalty's quiet thunder, ready to roll against the storm. Tears might have come at dawn, confrontation at noon, but here, in the valley's embrace, resolve bloomed eternal, a promise outlasting the miles. If this chapter stirred something in you, please hit that like button below. It helps these stories reach more hearts in need of hope. The valley's hush deepened as midnight cloaked the ranch in inky folds, the stars a scattered jury overhead, indifferent to the tensions brewing below. Hawk stood on the porch's edge, the wood groaning under his weight, a cigarette's ember glowing like a lone firefly in the chill. Noah slept soundly inside, her crib now a proper one scavenged from the barn's loft, the dog's muzzle resting on its rim in vigilant repose. The intrusion earlier had sharpened every sense, the bootprints too deliberate, the treads matching the SUV's profile, a silent declaration that the shadows weren't content with retreat. Reyes joined him, 2 mugs of black coffee steaming in his gnarled hands, the aroma cutting through the night's pine-laced bite. "Perimeter's quiet now," he said, passing one over, his voice a rumble honed by decades of watching backs. "But they tasted the ground. Won't be long till they bite." His eyes, shadowed by the brim of his faded cap, held the weight of his own ghosts. A son lost to the system's grind, paperwork that buried truth under red tape. Reyes had buried that pain in the soil here, turning the ranch into a bulwark for the club's quiet oaths. Hawk sipped, the bitterness grounding him, steam curling like unspoken doubts. The council's decision lingered. File for guardianship, unearth Sarah's trail. Elena's lawyer contact was en route at dawn, a wiry ex-prosecutor named Harlan who'd traded courtrooms for conscience after seeing too many innocents crushed. But digging meant stirring the muck, Riley's crash reports, Sarah's last knowns, the trucking syndicate's web that snaked through official veins. "We start with the note," Hawk murmured, pulling the paper from his vest pocket, its edges frayed from handling. Riley's scrawl seemed alive in the low light, a lifeline etched in desperation. Inside, the main room hummed with subdued activity. Jax pored over a battered laptop at the table, its screen casting blue ghosts on his scarred face, pulling threads from dark corners of the net, anonymous forums where whispers of relocated witnesses surfaced like bubbles in tar. Prospects rotated watches, one mixing formula in the kitchen's dim bulb, the soft clink of bottles a counterpoint to the wind's sigh. The air carried the faint, milky scent of Noah's feeds, mingling with leather and gun oil, a tapestry of makeshift family. A low whine from the dog shattered the calm, its head snapping toward the east wash. Hawk and Reyes moved as one, dousing the porch light, the night swallowing them whole. The pack stirred silent, forms melting from shadows, rifles low, boots muffled on the dew-kissed grass. Jax clicked off the laptop, joining with a nod, his enforcer's bulk a promise of force held in check. They fanned out toward the intrusion point, flashlights off, guided by the moon's silver bleed and the dog's unerring nose. The wash was a gash in the earth, dry riverbed choked with scrub, its banks rising like silent flanks. Halfway down, the dog froze, hackles rippling, a guttural warning vibrating in its throat. Hawk signaled halt, crouching low, the grit crunching under his knees. There, faint glimmers in the underbrush, not stars but reflections, a discarded cigarette butt, still warm, and beside it, a small recorder, black and unassuming, half buried in sand. Jax scooped it up, thumbing the play button with gloved care. A voice crackled out, tinny but clear. Sarah's, strained with urgency, time stamped months back. Riley, if you get this, they found me. The program's a lie, fed covers for the syndicates. I'm going under deeper, but the baby's coming. Promise me. Iron, promise. Keep her safe. Static swallowed the rest, but the weight landed like a dropped anchor. Sarah alive, or had been, her words a beacon through the corruption's fog. The suit's protection was a cage, relocating threats to silence them, Riley's enemies pulling strings from boardrooms stained with payoffs. Hawk's pulse thrummed, the recorder clutched like contraband gold. She reached out, he breathed, the canyon confrontation replaying, the leader's flicker of recognition when he'd seen the note. Not ignorance, but complicity, a man burying his own doubts to keep the machine fed. The dog nosed the butt, sniffing out the intruder's trail, but it veered cold, swallowed by the night. They'd planted this, a lure or a leak, testing if the club would bite. Back at the house, the find ignited the council anew. Under the lamp's steady glow, they mapped it out. Harlan would weave Sarah's recording into guardianship filings, proof of blood ties and peril, framing Iron Promise as the only shield against institutional betrayal. No courts yet, Jax cautioned, voice edged with the day's standoff. Leak this wrong, they bury us in warrants. We go quiet. Find her first. Reyes nodded, tracing syndicate routes on the map, trucking hubs where Riley had crossed lines, loads that hid more than cargo. Noah stirred then, her cry a soft summons cutting the strategy's steel. Hawk rose, crossing to her crib, the room's eyes following with a mix of resolve and ache. He lifted her gently, her warmth a talisman against the encroaching, dark, tiny fists batting at his beard as he settled into a rocker by the fire's embers. The dog pressed close, whining approval, while the pack watched. 50 hard men, their faces etched with the quiet ferocity of chosen kin. Jax knelt beside, his massive hand dwarfing hers as she grasped a finger. Riley's eyes, he murmured, voice cracking like parched earth. She sees us, brother. Knows we're here. The moment stretched, emotional currents swirling in the firelit hush, redemption not in grand clashes, but in this vigil, oaths renewed around a child's breath. Hawk rocked slow, the creek sinking with the night's pulse, memories of Riley flooding back, foxhole promises under foreign skies where loyalty outshone medals. Sarah's voice on the tape echoed that bond, a thread pulling them toward justice's slow burn. The syndicates and their fed puppets had twisted laws into nooses, but Iron Promise cut deeper, honor forged in chrome and scars, unyielding. Dawn crept in grey fingers as the plan solidified. Scouts to the hubs at first light, Harlan's arrival to lock in papers, rotations doubled for the ranch. The intruders had left their mark, but it backfired, a gift of truth that bound the club tighter. Hawk handed Noah to raise, her coos fading as sleep reclaimed her, the dog trailing like a faithful echo. Stepping onto the porch, the air crisp with promise, Hawk lit another smoke, exhaling toward the horizon where the road waited. The suits would return, their authority a hollow thunder, but the moral compass spun true now. Sarah's trail glimmered, Noah's future a beacon. Iron promise rolled on, not for vengeance, but for the legacy that outlasted shadows, family chosen in the quiet hours, justice whispered on the wind. The engines would roar again soon, carrying vows into the light, where hard men wept not for weakness, but for the strength to stand eternal. The first rays of dawn sliced through the valley like hesitant blades, gilding the ranch's sagging fences and turning the dew-kissed grass into a mosaic of silver and gold. Hawk's boots crunched softly on the gravel as he stepped from the porch, the air sharp with the scent of cooling earth and distant rain, a rare promise in the arid sprawl. Noah's soft breaths echoed from inside, a rhythm that anchored the night's vigil, the dog lifting its head from the crib's edge with a quiet huff. The pack stirred in the yard, engines coughing to life in low growls, the metallic tang of exhaust mingling with the pine's resinous bite. Scouts were rolling out, Jacks leading a tight trio toward the trucking hubs, their Harleys vanishing down the rutted trail like shadows reclaiming the light. Reyes handed Hawk a thermos of coffee, black and steaming, his weathered face etched deeper by the greying sky. "They'll sniff out leads," he said, voice steady as the fence posts he'd mended 1,000 times. "Harlan's due by noon, papers in hand, but keep eyes on the little one. Shadows don't sleep." The older rider's hand lingered on Hawk's shoulder, a silent transfer of the ranch's watch, his own losses fueling the quiet ferocity that bound them. Inside, prospects bustled with dawn chores, formula warming on the stove, its milky warmth cutting the wood smoke haze, while the council's maps lay furled on the table, marked with syndicate routes that spiderwebbed like veins of corruption. Hawk nodded, sipping the bitter brew, the heat seeping into his bones like resolve. Sarah's voice from the recorder played in loops in his mind, strained but unbroken, a thread pulling against the institutional noose. The suit's intrusion last night hadn't just probed defenses, it had gifted clarity, proof that the protection program was a syndicate shield, relocating threats to warehouses where silence was enforced with whispers and worse. Riley had died chasing that truth, his crash a convenient erasure, and now Noah's existence demanded the club unearth it, not with fists, but with the unyielding light of oaths kept. The morning unfolded in measured beats, the ranch a hive of purposeful motion. Hawk cradled Noah on the porch rocker, her tiny form nestled against his vest, the club's patch brushing her cheek like a talisman. She gazed up with eyes that mirrored Riley's, clear, unyielding, her gurgles drawing soft smiles from the hard men rotating through. One prospect, a lanky kid named Tate with fresh ink from a recent initiation, paused mid-patrol to coo at her, his rifle slung loose. "Never figured on this," he admitted, voice rough with the vulnerability of youth. "Riding for a promise like her feels right." The dog thumped its tail in agreement, pressing close, its scarred flank a testament to roads shared in secret. By mid-morning, the horizon shimmered with heat, the sun climbing to bake the valley into a furnace. Harlan arrived in a dust-caked sedan, his suit rumpled but eyes sharp as he unfolded from the driver's seat, briefcase in hand like a shield against the world's grind. Elena had vouched for him, a man who'd walked away from prosecutions that twisted justice into knots, now forging paths for the overlooked. "Guardianship docs," he said, spreading papers on the oak table under the main room's fan whirring overhead. "Club as collective kin, blood oath over biology. The recording, it'll bolster intent. Proof of peril without dragging courts into the fray yet." His pen scratched deliberate, the ink a quiet rebellion against red tape. Hawk reviewed the forms, the legal jargon blurring into the moral core. Iron promise as family, sworn to Noah's light. Reyes signed first, his signature a flourish born of old battles, while the prospects gathered, witnessing with nods that sealed the pact. "This ain't just paper," Harlan murmured, glancing at Noah in her crib, the dog's watchful gaze mirroring his caution. "It's armor, but if they push warrants, we need her trail solid. Any hits from your scouts?" As if summoned, Jax's radio crackled to life, the enforcer's voice cutting through static like a blade. "Hub on the edge. Trucker loose-lipped after a beer. Sarah surfaced months back, posing as a dispatcher. Relocated to a safe house near the old rail yards, but it went dark. Word is syndicates leaned on the feds to clean house. Coordinates incoming." The transmission hissed out, laced with the rumble of engines idling at a greasy spoon, the air there thick with fry oil and half-truths. The find ignited the room, maps unrolled anew, fingers tracing the rail yard's sprawl. A forgotten industrial scar where rusting boxcars hunkered like beached whales, weeds choking the tracks. Hawk's pulse quickened, the scent of oiled rails and stagnant water rising in his mind's eye, a place where shadows thrived. "We ride at dusk," he decided, voice forging the path. "Quiet recon, no charges. Bring back answers, not echoes." The pack murmured assent, the emotional undercurrents swelling, redemption's pull, Riley's ghost urging them forward, Noah's future the compass. But the afternoon brought its own tension, a psychological vice tightening as Harlan probed deeper. "The leader from the canyon," he said, pulling a grainy photo from his briefcase. The slick-haired suit, face blurred but unmistakable. Name's Carver. Ex-Fed, now consulting for transport firms. Clean on paper, but I've seen his type. Conscience sold for pensions. If Sarah's alive, he's the key to her cage. The revelation hung heavy, stirring dilemmas. Confront him outright, risk escalation, or weave through the web with subtlety, honoring the club's code of measured justice. Hawk stepped outside to clear his head, the sun's glare forcing his shades down. Noah secured in a sling against his chest. The valley breathed around him, birds wheeling overhead in lazy arcs. But the prickle returned. Eyes on the ridge, a faint glint of glass or metal. The dog bristled, whining low, its nose questing the wind. Carver's people probing again, or a syndicate scout drawn by the morning's movements. Hawk's hand rested on his sidearm, not drawing, but the moral ache deepened, how to shield without becoming the monsters they fought. Back inside, the council adapted, rotations beefed for the ranch, while the dusk ride prepped. Bikes tuned silent, saddlebags stocked with tools for extraction, not assault. Tate volunteered for Noah's watch, his young resolve shining as he rocked her gently, her laughter bubbling like a spring in the desert. Jax radioed final chords, his tone edged with the day's grit. "She's out there, brother. Riley's promise led us this far." The words bound them tighter, 50 souls in leather and scars, chosen family forging ahead. As the sun bled toward the horizon, painting the ridges in fiery strokes, Hawk mounted up. Noah passed to Reyes with a lingering touch. The engines idled low, a symphony of anticipation, the air humming with the scent of hot chrome and unspoken vows. The rail yards called, Sarah's trail a glimmer in the dusk, but the glint on the ridge sharpened, movement deliberate, closing in. Harlan's sedan peeled out first, a decoy toward town, while the pack formed up, throttles twisting into the fading light. The ride unfurled tense, dust trails merging with twilight's veil. The dog's absence felt like a missing heartbeat. Hawk led, wind whipping his bandana, the moral crossroads looming. Find Sarah, expose the rot, or face Carver's web head-on. Justice whispered on the breeze, poetic and unyielding, as the yard's silhouette rose. Boxcars looming like judgments, secrets buried in rust and shadow. Iron promise rolled toward revelation, legacy's weight a steady thrum, ready to unearth truth from the grave of lies. But in the mirrors, pursuit flickered, a black silhouette gaining, the promise demanding one final stand. The dusk bled into the rail yards like spilled ink, the sun's last gasp painting rusted boxcars in strokes of crimson and shadow. Hawk's convoy ghosted through the perimeter fence's gap, engines muffled to whispers, tires crunching over gravel, strewn with shattered glass and forgotten freight. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of decay, oiled rails cooling in the twilight, stagnant pools reflecting the first stars like fractured mirrors. Mesquite thorns snagged at leathers as the pack dismounted, forming a silent wedge, rifles slung low, and eyes scanning the labyrinth of hulking metal skeletons that loomed like the bones of industrial ghosts. Jax took point, his bulk navigating the narrow aisles between cars, the faint glow of his flashlight cutting swathes through the gloom. The cords from the trucker's loose lips pointed here, a derelict corner where safe houses hid in plain sight, camouflaged as abandoned storage. Hawk followed close, the sling against his chest empty now, Noah safe at the ranch under Reyes's unblinking watch. But her weight lingered in his mind like an anchor. The dog's absence echoed too, left behind for this recon, its whines a memory that tugged at the edges of resolve. Sarah's voice from the recorder played on a loop in his head, urgent and unbroken, fueling the quiet fury that simmered beneath the club's measured steps. A glint caught Hawk's eye, mirrors from Chapter 6's pursuit. The black SUV now parked at the yard's far edge, its occupants spilling out like oil into water. Carver led them, silhouette sharp against the fading light, flanked by two shadows in dark coats, hands hovering near concealed steel. They moved with purpose, not the club's stealth, boots echoing off the cars as they quartered the area. "They're here for the same," Jax hissed over the radio. Voice a gravel rasp. "Pushed us right into their trap." Hawk signaled a split, half the pack to flank, left through the boxcar maze, the rest holding the right, a pincer of leather and loyalty. The yards pulsed with tension, wind whistling through gaps like warnings, carrying the faint scent of rain on the horizon. Memories of Riley surged, shared rides through similar wastes, promises swapped under starlit canopies, where honor meant more than survival. This wasn't vengeance, it was reclamation, pulling Sarah from the syndicate's maw, exposing the Fed's complicit veil that had swallowed Riley whole. The confrontation brewed in a clearing amid the cars, a flat expanse littered with crates and chains that clinked softly in the breeze. Carver halted center, spotting the club's advance, his face a mask of calculated calm under the sodium lamps flickering to life overhead. "Daniels," he called, voice carrying smooth, laced with the authority of boardrooms and backroom deals. "You followed the breadcrumbs. Smart. But this ends now. Hand over the child, and we walk away clean." Hawk stepped into the open, the pack materializing from shadows like specters forged in chrome, a circle of resolve that dwarfed the suit's trio. Jax loomed at his side, the others fanning out, the air thickening with the unspoken threat of oaths unbreakable. "Ends with truth," Hawk replied, tone even as drawn steel, pulling the recorder from his vest. He thumbed play, Sarah's voice spilling out into the night, strained pleas against the program's lies, the syndicate's grip twisting protection into peril. Carver's eyes widened fractionally, the flicker of buried conscience cracking his facade, color draining as the words indicted him silent. "You're done hiding her," Hawk pressed, closing the distance, the ground crunching under boots like brittle bones. "Riley died for this. Sarah reached him, not you. Your relocation buried witnesses, lined pockets, Noah's the proof, his blood, our promise." The suits shifted, hands twitching, but Carver raised a palm, halting them, his gaze dropping to the device as if it burned. The yards held breath, distant train horns moaning like laments, the moral vice tightening, justice not in bullets, but in the unmasking of corruption's rot. One suit lunged, desperation cracking his poise, but Jack's moved like thunder contained, tackling him into the gravel with a thud that echoed off the cars. The second drew, steel glinting, but Reyes' shot cracked the air, a warning into the dirt. The report sharp as a vow severed. Carver stood frozen, the fight leaching from him. Shoulders slumping under the weight of revelations long suppressed. She was collateral, he admitted, voice fracturing like thin ice. Syndicates own the roots. Feds look away for cuts. Sarah saw too much, the baby's leverage. I signed the orders. Thought it kept the peace. Hawk's fist clenched, the urge to strike a reflex drowned by the deeper ache. Redemption's edge, where breaking a man served no honor. Peace built on graves ain't peace, he said quietly, the words landing heavy. Sarah, where? Carver's eyes met his, hollow now, the tablet from the canyon forgotten in his pocket. East warehouse, chained under guard. We were tying loose ends tonight. A nod from Jax sealed it. The pack surged, binding the suits with zip ties scavenged from saddlebags. The takedown clean, no blood spilled in the dust. The warehouse squatted at the yard's fringe, its doors yawning like a forgotten mouth, interior lit by bare bulbs swinging lazy. Inside, the air reeked of mildew and fear, crates stacked high hiding a corner cell, bars makeshift but solid. Sarah huddled within, gaunt but alive, eyes widening at the club's intrusion. Her hair matted, clothes torn from months of captivity, but the fire in her gaze burned Riley's echo. "You came," she whispered as Hawk knelt, working the lock with bolt cutters that sang through metal. The guards, syndicate muscle, low-rung thugs, yielded quick to the pack's tide, overpowered and secured without a shot fired, justice poetic in its restraint. She collapsed into Hawk's arms, sobs racking her frame. The warmth of reunion, a balm on scars unseen. "Noah, Riley said you'd keep her." The name broke something in Hawk, tears tracing paths down his weathered cheeks, unashamed among brothers who shared the salt. Jax radioed the ranch. "She's here, coming home." The transmission crackling with relief that rippled through the line. Sarah clutched the recorder, her voice on it a bridge rebuilt. As the pack escorted her out, the yards receding like a nightmare shed. Dawn found them back at the ranch, engines silent in the yard, the valley awakening in soft light that gilded the fences anew. Noah stirred in her crib at Sarah's touch, mother and child entwining in a hush of breaths and tears, the dog nosing close with whines of joy. Harlan's papers waited, signed and sealed, iron promise etched as guardian kin, the recording and Carver's confession, turned over to clean feds via back channels, unraveling the web. Syndicates would fall, slow but sure, justice moral and inexorable, built on truths unearthed. Hawk stood on the porch, coffee steaming in his hands, the pack gathered loose, faces softened by the light. Jax clapped his shoulder. Reyes nodded from the rocker. Prospects tending the bikes with quiet pride. Sarah rocked Noah inside, her voice murmuring lullabies that carried on the breeze, a family chosen blooming from loss's ashes. Tears had come at dawn's find, in the yard's shadows, but now they sealed legacy. Promises kept, honor enduring, the road ahead clear of ghosts. The sun rose full, bathing the ranch in gold as iron promise stood eternal, bound by loyalty's quiet thunder, a vow outlasting the miles. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of unbreakable promises and chosen family. If it moved you, please subscribe for more stories that honor the heart's deepest oaths. We'll see you on the next horizon.